record, that would be awesome. Excellent. Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Main Streets webinar. This is part of NSFM's regular webinar series. So we're really happy. We can see the numbers going up. It's quite exciting. So thank you so much for joining us on this sunny day. I think it's the last Thursday in August. So we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. And I think the numbers of people joining us is a testament to the importance of this subject and to the great project that we're about to talk to you about and steps moving forward. So I'm Debbie Nielsen. I'm one of 6 staff at NSFM, and Judy Weber's here with me as well, and she's just going to help with the chatting aspect of the webinar and admitting people as we go along. So I just have a couple of slides I wanted to share with you. Sorry, just have to click forward. Oh. Technical difficulties. There we go. I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items because I do know we have a few people new to Zoom. So as I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded and we're going to post that on our website probably early next week. So people that weren't able to make it today can see it. And if you want to review the webinar, it'll be there for you. As well, our presenters have graciously agreed to share the presentation with you as well. So we'll post both of those so you can access those sometime next week on our website. I think you all know you're muted. We're just trying to ensure a good quality of audio for everyone. And for those of you that are new to the Zoom platform, because you're muted, certainly you can unmute yourself. And when we get to the question and answer period, you're welcome to do that. But please feel free to put any questions that you want during the presentations into the chat box, and both Judy and I will keep an eye on that. And the chat box, if you hover your cursor along the bottom of your screen, a little black bar, the black bar that you see on my screen will pop up, and just almost dead center, you'll see chat, and you just have to click there and just type away, and we will keep a good eye on those. And I'm sure we'll have time to answer all questions, but if for some reason we don't, because we endeavor to end it at 12 o'clock because we know people are very busy, we can get back to you and we'll email the answers to any questions that we didn't get to after this webinar. And that also, I wanted to say, if you do have questions that you didn't chat to us and you wanted to ask us afterwards, we're happy to help you with those. So we have 4 presenters here today, so we've got a pretty full agenda. So I'm just going to introduce the presenters quickly, and then I'll pass it over. So Gord Tate is with us, and Gord is the Active Living Coordinator for the District of Chester, and he's also the chair of NSFM's AT Committee. So he's been in that role for quite a long time. We just can't seem to give him up, so we're happy that he's here to serve us in that role. Also with us today, we have David Patterson, and he's a planner with FBM, and Kieran Hunt as well. He's the planning lead with FBM, and they were both the authors and the coordinators behind the Main Street workbook. And also today we have Leanne Jennings. She's with Develop Nova Scotia, and she's going to talk a little bit about placemaking and the approach that Develop Nova Scotia is taking, and that ties in directly with the Main Street initiative. So I have one more quick slide. I just wanted to say there are so many folks and organizations that contributed to this project, and I would be remiss not to take just a couple seconds to thank them. So of course, this project was spearheaded by NSFM's AT Committee with Gord at the helm, and with some great contributions from our from Bicycle Nova Scotia, who are also on our AT Committee. We got a grant from Connect2 from Department of Energy and Mines, which allowed us to conduct this project and develop the workbook. And so the project was basically undertaken by Dave and Kieran at FBM. So it's their great work that we'll be talking about soon. But we had lots of contributors financially and in kind, and provided input. So we had EAC provided with us with some support, Develop Nova Scotia, TIR, Dalhousie University Planning School, Cape Breton Partnership, HRM, Chester, East Hants, Pictou County, Wren, the County of Richmond, St. Peter's Economic Development Organization, and Westfield. So I hope I haven't missed anyone, but a big thank you to everyone that made this project possible. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to now pass it over to Gord, and he's going to kick us off and talk a little bit about the project background. So over to you, Gord.
Thanks, Deb. So just very quick greetings from the Active Transportation Committee. I see some of our members are on the call today as well. And thank you very much for being here, everyone, to take part in this conversation. For us, the AT committee spends a lot of time thinking about mobility, but particularly last fall, we really started to think about how people move through our towns, and particularly those towns that are often bisected by provincial highways. So that was a bit of the impetus for leading us down this path of thinking about main streets. And serendipitously at the same time, we met Dave and Kieran, who were thinking about the same thing, but also with the lens of kind of commerce. And then along came into the fold Leanne and developed Nova Scotia, thinking about placemaking and how all these things flow together. So we're incredibly pleased with the results of this project to date. And we look forward to doing more work together as well. And we're also really pleased with the conversations that it sparked. And this one is an example of it today. So we challenge you and invite you to think about the applicability of some of the stuff that we're going to go through today for your own communities and your own settings, and see what kind of more good work we can do together in this province over time. So with that, I'm just going to pass it over to Dave to get into the presentation here. So take it away, Dave. Thanks very much, everyone.
Sure, I just had a little bit more on the kind of project trajectory here that we can talk about our next phase as well. But why don't we leave that to later on? We'll talk about next steps going on further. Why don't I just get into the community workbook contents, and we'll skip back to those slides later on. So the community workbook, which Gord kind of touched on there, that's the product of our engagement through Connect2 and with those partner organizations. We did engagement sessions in February, just prior to the pandemic, visiting communities in Elmsdale, in Westville, and St. Peters. And we also did some research alongside Dalhousie University School of Planning students to really kind of bring together what are the opportunities and challenges of main streets. And one thing that we thought was interesting about main streets is, in a way, they're really a microcosm of a lot of the different issues that are at play in rural communities, in terms of accessibility, in terms of local business, in terms of safety, in terms of walkability, in terms of livability, quality of life, and attracting tourism and population growth. So that research really, it brought together a lot of people from different silos. People that are really connected to the active transportation realm, with folks like Develop Nova Scotia and Leanne, with a focus on placemaking. And then others like the regional enterprise networks with a focus on local economic development. And Main Streets, we just found was a really great venue to bring together all these ideas. And then speaking with community members, it's a really tangible entry point into talking about communities. So I don't want to dig too deep into the workbook contents from the research perspective, but I'll invite you to download the workbook at the link provided. There's also a web version of the workbook, which has recently come together, which is a bit more of a web-friendly version. Our friends at the College Action Center and the Active Atlantic website helped put that together. I'm just going to sort of jump through, but I want to really focus actually on those last two bullets, the principles and approaches for Main Streets. And then Kieran, my colleague, is going to talk about policy considerations. And just by way of introduction, this was part of the workbook. This is just one community. This is the community of Elmsdale, and some of the concepts that really emerged from that conversation. So that was ideas about these key nodes and key destination clusters that make the main street. Some of them are in the Main Street area, but then in the case of Elmsdale, there's others that are a little bit more off the main street, such as the rec center, the major grocery stores, etc. But we really wanted to sort of conceptualize main streets and the adjacent areas in terms of those key destinations, the focal points, as well as considering, where does future growth happen and where does change happen to really augment what's good on Main Street and start to deal with some of the challenges we're also finding there. I'm going to just jump into the principles, and I hope this isn't too small to see on your screen. This is kind of an overview slide of the 7 principles that really emerged from the conversations we had in Westville, Elmsdale, and St. Peters. And a lot of these are kind of shown as layered, but they really all, there's lots of things that work together. And one thing that we also found in our conversation is there's definitely a role for the infrastructure. There's a role for the major investment, things like sidewalks or intersection improvements and things like that. But there's also just as much a role for individual businesses to make main streets really special, or individual community groups to really identify how they can catalyze a small change that really makes a big difference in the importance of a place and the value of main streets and Nova Scotia's smaller communities from a placemaking perspective. So I'm going to just kind of touch on each of these 7 approaches and some of the ideas that are behind them. It's going to be kind of a rapid, but we can discuss them further, and I'd kind of really urge you to take a look at the workbook in terms of kind of diving into them. So the first principle is locate main streets and treat them differently from the rest of the province's roadway network, with a focus on walkability and community activity. So this is really kind of a question where many of the main streets are in the context of the province's trunks and routes, the provincially maintained road network. And it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of messiness we find with main streets from a transportation perspective, where there's challenges in terms of pedestrian access, but then also vehicle access and parking and congestion cause some issues. So we really thought it was important to sort of locate where those main streets are, where those kind of both those tension points, the challenges, and also the opportunities. And thinking about things like gateway moments. How do you kind of know that you've entered a community? How do you know that you're there, that you're in a place that has a unique character? And there's related concepts of friction, which is basically the idea that when you're driving through a community, what slows you down to make you take notice, to sort of reduce speeds, which then leads to pedestrian safety. And then this also relates to switching kind of from an automotive scale of development, where you can think of sort of billboards and large surface parking lots, to more of a fine-grained pedestrian-oriented or human scale development. What's the kind of building design or the signage requirements that start to indicate that you're dealing with pedestrians as much as you are dealing with vehicles passing through? Principle 2, make walking and wheeling work on main streets. As probably many of you know, where we do have the provincially maintained roads, it's typically the village or the municipality that's responsible for the walking infrastructure. There are some communities as well. We met with Westville, and in Westville, the municipality owns the roadway rather than TIR. But in many cases, it's finding this match of the sidewalks and the crosswalks at destinations that allow us to get to where we're going and do things like crossing the street and getting into shops. So a lot of our older communities have inaccessible storefronts, and what are the supports needed to start to build that accessibility into the design of main streets. And then also connected with this is just doing little small moves to improve the pedestrian experience. So that's areas to rest, like benches, protection from the weather, whether the weather be sun in the heat of summer, or whether it's rain and snow. Moving along to principle 3. In terms of main streets, is recognizing the importance of parking, cycling, and community transit. And parking is actually a big one. And as you know, anyone who's done public consultation knows, parking tends to be a major theme at top of mind for people when working in communities. And in smaller towns and villages, it's quite important, because what we found is most people live in the rural context several kilometers away from Main Street. So it's not likely that people will be walking to Main Street so much from their communities, from their homes. But then what's that parking concept where people can drive to a Main Street, have those 5 or 6 destinations, meet their friends, have a coffee, get groceries, pick up their mail. What's the sort of park and walk scenario that will really help communities to thrive? Cycling is also really key. Throughout the province, what we found is while there is a latent desire to cycle, most people don't feel safe cycling on the roadway in our communities. And so how does cycling play a role in getting people around and achieving a healthy lifestyle? And then community transit is relevant in many communities. It really depends on the kind of regional picture, but in the Annapolis Valley, in Halifax Regional Municipality, Cape Breton Municipality, and other areas, transit definitely has a role to play as well. And potentially that transit system will grow in the province. Moving on to principle 4, create places and experiences so that Main Street is where people want to be. And this is really a fantastic contribution we had from Leanne in Develop Nova Scotia, which was what's the place of Main Street? What really draws people to go and spend time on Main Street? And especially as opposed to spending time in other places like the big box stores or the staying at home. What brings communities together? And what we really found is it is taking this placemaking approach where having these small community places where people can gather, and that also in the end benefits businesses nearby too. So that's it's small. It's it's the things. It's the kind of the furniture catalog. It is it's lampposts, it's benches, it's areas, but it's also about kind of making those be really felt as important to the community and being really central to the community. And there's a really great exercise that I'd like to bring up called the Power of 10 Plus. The Power of 10 Plus, it's kind of a thought exercise that the Project for Public Space introduced, which is to go to a place in your community and whether it's a main street or a specific intersection, and think about 10 things you could do there. What are, are you going there to meet a friend? Are you going there to pick up your mail? Are you going there to get groceries? Are you picking up a library book? These places usually thrive, not just when there's kind of one thing to do, but when there's 10 or more things to do. And so if you think about a really key location on your main street, how does that become the focal point of activity where you get a diversity of uses and a diversity of activities happening there? So the Power 10 Plus exercise is something that we really push communities to start thinking about when conceiving of their main streets. And also especially what sets the community apart. So, I mean, we all know that kind of having benches and waste receptacles and things like that are important, but rather than kind of just picking them off of a generic catalog, how do you make it actually integral part of the community that you're from? And a lot of that, in our experience, a lot of that comes from an engagement exercise and from, I guess you'd say, storytelling. So what's the story of our community? And how can we express that in how we design the place? Principle 5, support community champions and foster local business. We'll touch on this a little bit later when Kieran speaks, but certainly with COVID-19 and the pandemic, our main streets are really suffering. And that's especially felt by local businesses that have had to stop operations or really curtail their business. But it is really key to supporting local businesses that there is a healthy ecosystem downtown of both business activity and business organization, as well as resident involvement. Principle 6, cluster future development to reinforce a thriving Main Street. This is really a concept around land use and what's the kind of building design requirements and where are we trying to push development or sort of focus development, and how can we do that in a way that helps Main Streets to be active. It's also related to housing development too. One thing that we heard in a lot of the communities that we spoke to is a desire to have more housing options close to Main Street, especially as our population ages and it's harder to drive from destinations further away. There's a lot of interest in aging in place in smaller communities and being able to walk to the grocery store, walk to the services. And so that requires both having the housing nearby that's accessible and affordable, as well as having the services on Main Street. And we really found that Main Streets, in opposition to the big box stores, is really the places that serve customers from an accessibility, serve residents from an accessibility point of view much more strongly. Principle 7 is kind of a larger overarching one, which is really to recognize that Main Streets are unique and changing. So it's not necessarily about, it's about, maintaining the heritage and the ideas of what we've done in the past, but also to welcome new entrepreneurs, to welcome new business types, and to really grow and change as the demographics change on our Main Streets and in our smaller communities. So I think with that, that's really a broad overview. I didn't quite touch on everything, but these are really the themes that we brought together in our engagement and in our research. I'm going to just turn it over to my colleague Kieran, who I think you can see right here. I'll just bring the computer closer to him. That's okay. And he'll take it off to speak a little bit towards policy considerations.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay as I be that voice in the back of the room. Again, what David mentioned and talking about the principles and approaches, we encourage you to read through the workbook. There are a lot more than what we can surely cover off in the time we have with you today. But obviously the principles that we have worked through and carefully vetted with the communities, they inform our policy considerations and our policies as we look to formulate methods and rationale for moving forward with the Main Streets program. We've developed 12 principles, 12 policy considerations and some next steps that go hand in hand in our analysis and hopefully that are providing helpful to you as community leaders and working with the citizenry in your towns. Our first one is to differentiate Main Streets in the context of the communities in which they're located. And we realize that every community is unique, but we feel there is a need to come up with a more crystallized vision of what Main Streets are throughout the province and where they specifically are located. We find that in some of the communities, there is no clear boundary for what Main Streets are. And if we can work to creating that Main Streets district, we could work with TIR and the municipalities, and in so doing, create a defined area. And once you create that defined area, it gives you more flexibility to come up with the implementation tools towards making them more safer, stronger economically, and better part of the social fabric in the communities. Our second is the ability to support audits for community accessibility and provide grants for accessibility enhancements. And I would say that it's not just simply on accessibility audits, but we would look at the ability to include audits for walkability, audits for businesses and the economic performance of the businesses, audits for placemaking, bring all these together and work towards identifying where the strengths, opportunities are. They may be small incremental improvements that can have bigger impacts in time. Our third is the pilot projects. I'm sure many of you have heard about pilot projects and testing them, and Phil recently went through an exercise, and we can certainly talk about, you know, whether the duration or how successful they are. But at their core, pilot projects allow for communities to test concepts, test ideas that are quicker, faster, cheaper, and allow you to not invest large dollars in infrastructure. We know that in the smaller communities across Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada, budgets are tight, and even more so coming out of the pandemic. And when you're dealing with tighter budgets, the idea to implement pilot projects can really save a lot of money in the long run and can help you identify where the best investment in your dollars is placed. And these pilot projects can be for public realm, and they can even be for private realm as well. So there certainly is value in the pilot projects. Our fourth is to look at collaboration for placemaking. And in that, we take a collaborative approach to working with residents and businesses and stakeholders. And in fact, this is a community-driven process. In many respects in the past, government-led initiatives can fall flat if they don't have the support of the business or local community. And it's so critical nowadays to have a community-driven process, and in some respects, a community-led process. An example that's stirring a lot of momentum out locally is the Hubbard Streetscape project. Again, a community-driven process that is really creating support from the government. And what we've found in the past is that when the residents and the businesses can feel like they're driving a process, the support from the government is a lot easier, and it works much more coordinated that way. Our fifth policy is supporting for human-scaled development and vibrant main streets through updates to municipal planning strategies and local land use bylaws. And as David mentioned, there's a structural side to main streets, and that's how buildings are placed, whether they're scattered in a development pattern. Historically, the growth of small communities may have started in a small four corners, but it has grown to be somewhat haphazard. Buildings are placed far away from each other. They might have a commercial use, and connecting them has become a challenge in coordination with the increase in traffic volumes that some of these communities face on some of these roads. Enabling residential development in proximity. Again, small towns are sensitive to higher density, but there's always those soft densities that can work to support residential and help to bring new residents to the communities. What we're finding through the COVID pandemic is a redefining or a revaluation of small towns for residential living. And I think there's an opportunity to attract a newer demographic that historically may not have been possible, to curb outflow of residents that has been the issue over the past few years. We want to make sure that in these small towns, the pedestrian-oriented design is enabled, and design that appeals to the pedestrians and those that have challenges accessing and moving around to and within these communities. The opportunity from an economic standpoint as well for smaller storefronts. Typically, we would look at larger 1,000 square foot storefronts, but through this process, we could look at allowing for smaller storefronts that are micro units that allow for incubating local entrepreneurial activity, bringing those into your main street area. The opportunity sites, again, ties in closely with the support for human scale development, but in a lot of these communities that we've been to and that we see, there are a lot of vacant sites. There are opportunity sites that can stimulate energy on Main Street. And those can provide commercial, they can provide public realm space, they can provide opportunities for other civic amenities. And they need to be considered carefully in how and where they're located within the community. There's opportunities for strategic infill strategies for temporarily vacant lots. Our seventh is beautification and facade grant programs. Those have been most frequent over the past many years and are available. Some communities still have them. Others they didn't get much uptake, and they've not pursued those as much. But they are effective in a in achieving improvements to storefronts that have become run down, and you can create a lot of energy by just having small investments in your storefront. It shows to the visitors, to those people coming in, that there's a certain level of care and quality to the community. For any visitors, for any communities looking to attract visitors or residents, the main streets are the face of the place. They in often respects can be the first and last impression. So you want to make that valuable through having simple interventions on beautification or facade grants. Our next one is the parking and wayfinding strategies. David spoke to parking, and obviously in communities in rural Nova Scotia and small towns, vehicle mobility is paramount. So we understand there's a need to still access and find adequate parking, but there's ways to accommodate that in more strategic manners, while not hindering the ability to find parking. But the wayfinding is often the key to that. Many communities, and those that are successful, have an ability to identify where that parking is. But not just that, it's once you're parked, how do you get around and within the Main Street area? And wayfinding is an incredible opportunity for a lot of communities and is underutilized as well. Our next is to consider community shuttles. In communities, in smaller communities, we often find a demographic, and as is the case in Nova Scotia, demographic is sometimes older, people with differing abilities. And community shuttles provide a way to provide access for those residents to the Main Street and connecting within. They're not in a bigger city where you have access to larger transit components, but a community shuttle that services the local area provides a reason for, and a safe reason, and another economic benefit to bring residents closer to the Main Street. And it certainly does benefit those, the youth, as well as the seniors. Next is to business organizations and innovation. In small communities, from the economic standpoint, a lot of businesses are owned and operated. There's not much leasing structure, but you need to create an outreach for stakeholder engagement, also for succession management and succession planning, and having that network that can speak to landlords and property owners who may have a different idea of how their business could be run. But by creating succession planning, you're allowing companies not to close, but to find someone that could take that opportunity over and work within the community to keep the businesses alive. Small communities are built on the backbones of local businesses, and when one closes, it can have a detrimental effect. So this business organization and innovation is key. We're seeing new opportunities for remote working to take place in small towns, and using some current vacancies to create small workspaces for local entrepreneurs, to incubate them and create opportunities for them to graduate up. The next principle is to create a Main Streets network. In the United States, the U.S. Main Street Center, National Main Street Center, is a huge advocate for Main Streets of all sizes across the U.S. And in Canada, some provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta have had those programs and have been affiliated with the National Main Street Center. We would like to see something similar to that in Nova Scotia and even Atlantic Canada, to develop a Main Streets network like that. We also feel that the success of our project here, working with some of the RENs, regional enterprise networks, has been invaluable. We feel that is another great conduit to networking the value of Main Streets from an economic standpoint, as well as a social and environmental. Our last principle is simply to develop, we'd like to see the development of a statement of interest at the provincial level. This really speaks to the importance of Main Streets and recognizing them. We know that larger urban centers with Main Streets they have successful business improvement associations, they have a little bit more leverage, but we don't want the smaller towns in Nova Scotia to lose their focus and lose their Main Streets. We feel a provincial statement of interest would recognize this and go a long way to fulfilling the Main Streets network and concepts therein. With that being our policies there, we do realize that Main Streets themselves have been affected dramatically by the COVID pandemic, starting in March. But what we have also seen And we had started this study with a passion for main streets prior to the pandemic even starting. And we realized that we realized back then that main streets were important, but even more so coming out of the pandemic. There are many instances where we have seen businesses that are the lifeblood to local communities, but don't have a lot of cash flow. They have been some of the first to step up and give back to their communities. And we feel that if there is ever a time to invest in main streets at a level beyond the local communities and at a provincial or national level, this is the time. And we need to step forward to create this Main Street vision. The Canadian Urban Institute has launched its Bring Back Main Streets program, which we're happy to be a contributor to that organization. We still feel that there's a lot to do. We know that local main streets were struggling before and continue to struggle. We've been doing analyses in communities like Drumheller, where we've documented the economic impact at around 10% annualized for sales loss for businesses. That might seem like not as big a number as you were expecting, but annualized over the course of a year, that could mean that if a business has lost 10% of their sales at 2.5% growth per year, that could be a 4-year recovery for businesses, and they just can't survive that type of a recovery timeframe. So we need to make sure that we create the framework through all of these policies, all of these approaches that can help to stimulate economic viability and sustainability in these communities. And the Bring Back Main Street program is a conduit to that, as I said, but I think mostly this workbook we feel is an important step to creating momentum, which is a word we like to use a lot, and it will stimulate thinking in these communities to help promote that economic, social, and viability moving forward.
Shall we talk about next steps?
Yeah.
There's actually a slide that I skipped over previously I might jump up to, which is kind of an overview. If you scroll up to about 10 slides, just down one more right here. So I can speak to this, I guess. This is kind of our trajectory for the Main Streets project right now, working with our various partners. We've considered what we've done so far to be phase 1, which included engagement sessions in Elmsdale, Westville, and St. Peters, and the production of the community workbook. And the goals of that work are really to understand the issues of main streets, start to establish that conversation and get those issues on the table. But now we are actually looking towards a phase 2 right now and just starting that up. And so one of the kind of the agenda of this current presentation is we are looking to put the workbook to work. We are actually looking for additional communities to engage with. We are actually, Hubbard's is one community that we mentioned. Hubbard's has an active streetscapes project, and we're working with that community group to apply some of these approaches in their work. We had intended to engage with Hubbard's back in March, but the pandemic threw that plan for a bit of a loop. But what we're doing right now is we are looking to work with other communities and establish some of the tools that they could use to help put these policies or put these next steps into practice and really put the workbook to work. So the products that we're planning to develop coming up would be a conversation guide for really focused community conversations on what makes a community, I guess a community or resident focused conversation on main streets. What's the elements of that, so that it's really bottom up rather than top down. Another product that we're looking at out of this next phase is an assessment guide to really say both quantitatively and qualitatively assess how main streets are working. And with this idea of community main streets districts as a concept, what would be the criteria for establishing those? And then we're also looking to develop an ideas book with further ideas that especially are applicable in communities in Nova Scotia. One thing about Nova Scotia communities, and this is really the case across Canada, is there's a large number of communities that are in that range of 500 to 5,000 people. And that's really a sweet spot for these emerging main streets and to sort of to strengthen these smaller main streets and communities. A lot of the conversations that we work with as planners is focused on cities sort of the size of Halifax and up. So a lot of the examples will look to Toronto or Vancouver or New York City, but it's really a different context when we're working in communities such as where we are here in Nova Scotia for the majority of communities. So that's our trajectory, and so we'd really actually we have a few questions we wanted to ask. We'll just skip ahead here. So we did want to guide the conversation towards asking us a few questions, and I think Debbie might be able to put these into the chat box. Oh yeah, sorry, these are some more notes on that. Yeah, the focus. So we're planning to do community engagement in October. So we'll move over to Leanne. Oh yeah, so those questions, we want to really kind of find out if you folks have active projects or ideas related to main streets in your municipalities. If so, let us know, and let us know what kinds of tools are needed to get those off the ground. With that, I want to turn it over to Leanne, if you're there.
Great, yeah, I'm here.
To take over and kind of give a bit of an introduction to Develop Nova Scotia's role in placemaking in the province.
Great. I'll try and be quick. And for those of you who are maybe not as familiar with Develop Nova Scotia, I'm sure many of you are familiar with our work on the Internet for Nova Scotia initiative. That is one aspect of the work that we do. We are more generally, we are a provincial crown corporation responsible for developing high impact places and infrastructure. We are a small development agency consisting of planners, engineers, designers, program, and property developers and managers. We've done development type work on properties that we own and manage on the Halifax waterfront, Dartmouth waterfront, and Lunenburg waterfronts for many years. And in the recent past, we've had an expansion of our mandate to be pan-provincial, which has given us permission to then work with communities to enable you folks to become developers in your own right, which means identifying and executing on high impact projects that bring the community together and results in places that are authentic, inclusive, and sustainable. And to that end, two regional staff have been hired in the last year. Myself and my counterpart, Brian, we work within the regions to work with communities. Just to distinguish ourselves, we are not a granting agency. We're very particular about the kinds of projects that we believe we can have success in, both for ourselves and the communities. Here you see our three focus areas under thriving communities. That's where the Internet for Nova Scotia program lies. We also aim to build placemaking capacity within communities. And I'll just touch upon quickly our authentic destinations focus area, and of course working waterfronts where our history lies. Next slide. So we work towards inclusive economic development, and we take a placemaking approach. Our tactic is to work directly with communities so that we look for communities that have both the capacity and interest to work on placemaking so that they're the ones driving the bus. We look for the community to be the expert. What we do is, and so I'll just say that we're currently focusing on Main Street, as has already been described in this presentation. We know and understand that there's an opportunity in our main streets for them to be the heart and soul of a community where people come together and celebrate, where the identity of the community comes alive, and we know that they have been hit very hard due to this pandemic. So our focus is particularly on main streets at this time. We aim to build community through local participation and building places. We look to build places where people love, people are proud of, where they feel like they belong, and it's attractive to both visitors and people to come and live and work, and attractive to investment. So that's it for me. We've been really grateful to be a part of this work, and we're interested in continuing to learn and understand from communities in Nova Scotia where the greatest impacts can be on main streets.
Thanks, Leanne. So I think that concludes our presentation. There was one piece, Gord, you didn't touch on it, but we have some funding options, which I have a slide up here. I don't know if it's good to maybe just really quickly run through those and then save ourselves about 10 or 12 minutes for.
Yeah, just flash it up there really quick, Dave, and I'll address it.
Here we go.
So understanding the audience that we were going to have on the webinar today, we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that if you are inspired by some of this work that you've seen presented to you, or if you aim to be inspired, that you're aware that there's some funding opportunities that are either current or pending. And I know many of you on a call like this would have your ear to the ground and be aware of this stuff, but we didn't want to make that assumption as well. So right now out there, the Department of Energy and Mines for the province has the climate mitigation stream. There's intake for that one until September 9th. The federal government recently announced the COVID-19 community resilience stream. Details on that one are still to be announced, so keep your ears open for that one. Connect 2 is an ongoing program that's been in place for a number of years in the province. There's still an open call for that one until September 30th, so it's getting a little bit later in their time frame. A recent one that was announced by the federal government is the Canada Healthy Community Initiatives. Again, details are pending. Municipalities likely will not be direct applicants to that. They're looking for nonprofits to be the lead agencies on that and then to work with municipalities. But if you're not aware of it, please be aware of it. The Municipal Affairs Beautification and Streetscaping Program, the intake on that one is currently closed, but again, it's a thing that exists in this province and hopefully it'll be there in the future for us as well. And I just wanted to very quickly mention that, again, through the Active Transportation Committee and some of our partners, there is a proposal that is out there right now to work on a complete active transportation network for the province of Nova Scotia. The NSFM board has had that presentation made to them and they've endorsed that idea. So it's really, the seed is out there right now and there's a lot more work to do on that, but I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar as well. So with that, turn it back to you, Dave, and we can open up a discussion here.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just, I'll go to our thank you slides and open up for Q&A. I think Debbie's got the chat box open. And we did have actually, we had 3 kind of questions to pose to you folks to make it a little bit more interactive. One of them I mentioned before, which is, do you have any projects or ideas within your communities that relate to main streets that could really start to use these approaches? And that's really kind of going to help fueling us in our next steps of engagement.
Dave, can I just ask if people do have some active projects, can they just get in touch with you, I assume, after the presentation? Best to email you or Kieran? Yeah,
and we have our email addresses up here on the screen. And I assume, Debbie, we are sending out this presentation to everyone?
Absolutely. Well, we'll post it on our website. So it's really easy to find because it's one of the main tabs, just webinars. So just go to NSFM website, nsfm.ca. And you'll see the webinar tab and you just have to click on it and you will see the different webinars we've offered over the last couple months, I guess, and you'll see the Main Street one and just click on that and there'll be a recording plus this presentation.
Sure.
Oh, we have a new message. Exciting. So we did actually, David, we had a couple of comments. Did you want me to go through those and then down to the questions? Yeah, so David, I think it's David Hensby, Councillor David Hensby. I'm not sure if he wants to speak to this, but it looks like he's put together a Greenway project proposal in his area. Is that yours, Dave Hensby? Not to put you on the spot, but.
Hello.
Hi, David.
The question I had about the Connect 2 program, they're talking about greenways and trails as part funding of eligible projects, but sidewalks are excluded. And for a lot of the Main Street projects, a sidewalk is incorporated in a lot of Main Street projects. So how can we get them to modify their funding program to include sidewalks?
I can jump in there, Deb, just because I've had those recent conversations with my own council and working through Energy and Mines too, David. So I'd suggest probably looking at that climate mitigation stream for some of that stuff. That doesn't mean that's easy and it might be a little bit sticky as well. But I think that's probably where that's better placed at this moment in time. But your point is well taken, and perhaps there should be a call across the province for a change in some of that funding structure under Connect 2. Connect 2 is historically a reasonably small pot of money. It's done a lot of good work, absolutely. But I think that this Main Street project is also speaking about more comprehensive, holistic approach to how do we build these things, and and then obviously then how do they get funded.
And that climate change initiative you talked about, can that link be also put on the website as well?
Yeah, it was in that slide that I very quickly went through, so you'll see it there when you look for it, Dave.
Thanks.
Right on.
Great. Sorry, I'm just getting back to my screen here. Oh, and our colleague in Westfield was just talking about the fact that there's 5 municipalities in Pictou County, so it's really important to offer lots of reasons for people to stay within town, so walking, cycling, and staying close to amenities that they have to offer, but also making them unique so that you can draw from other communities. So, and if anybody wants to jump in after I read your comment, please do, and I'll stop talking. Elizabeth from TIR asked if I guess it would be our FBM folks, if you're looking for 3 new communities, or if you have any already in mind.
We have, we're working with Hubbard's, but other than that, we are really open.
Musquedominant Harbor, Porters Lake, and East Preston.
I wonder who the counselor is for those areas.
Yeah, and I can just jump in there as well. Dave and Kieran touched on this, but we're curious about if anyone wants to put their hands up there. The expectation is that the funding is going to be in place to support any of this work. So this is not a solicitation webinar. We're looking for kind of the best matches to continue this work. So that's why we do want to hear from you. If you do have some excitement around the idea of Main Street in your community and want to expand on that work and work through kind of the workbook approach to building on it, now's the time to connect with FBM.
All right, well, I'll send you the Musquedominant Harbor Community Conceptual Master Plan. They have quite a bit of the work already done.
You know, that's perfect. And I think further to Gord's point, one thing we do want to try to be as representative and balanced throughout the province as it is a strategy. So for whatever local ones would be nice for us being located out of Halifax, we wanted to make sure even in our initial group that we had at least representation from around the province. So, you know, that's where we encourage communities that may feel sometimes left out of the process that they can reach out to us as well through this process.
Great. And Ian Morrison had a question. What most surprised you when engaging with people about Main Streets?
My first one, and I will say this half-heartedly, is that there was a lot of interest in having accessibility for ATVs in a lot of rural communities to Main Streets. But the reality that I've relayed in various conversations is just how actively involved the residents are in these communities when we spoke with each of them. The level of participation was significant, and the desire to ensure that their Main Streets had a future rather than giving up on them was definitely very, very poignant.
I'd say also kind of an openness to change as well, and to adapting to the future as, you know, really dealing with demographic changes. I mean, people across Nova Scotia, residents just kind of know the ins and outs of where the province is going. And so I think that there's a lot of important self-determination to kind of take on those big issues of the future, which I think during COVID have really come to the surface very strongly.
Great. Thanks, David and Kieran. We might be having a bit of some issues with the chat, so I'm just going to read some comments here, and then I'm just going to open it up for people to unmute themselves. I've just gotten a couple notes that they can't access the chat, but Lisa McDonald from New Glasgow just made the comment that sidewalks are considered core infrastructure for municipalities. Rachel Jones from Oxford said, she has a comment here. We have worked on a better comprehensive welcoming signage program at our entrances and also implemented wayfinding signage last year. We are a successful applicant under the Municipal Affairs Beautification Program, which we will be rolling out. We are wanting to find funding to assist with installing community information kiosks and upgraded waste receptacles and other amenities. So Rachel, I'm not sure if that's just a comment or if you needed an answer for that, but if anybody has some funding options for Rachel, you can let me know and I could pass that information on to her. Not sure if anyone has a comment to that or if I can keep going. going. So Jonathan McClellan said about 20 years ago, there was a waterfront improvement fund that helped a lot of small towns clean up their downtown. Part of the matching funds could be in kind, which leveraged a lot of additional support. That's great. Could something like this be restarted again? I'm not sure if that was a question for Leanne or not, but I can just leave it there. I'll leave that one there.
Who was that? Who was that administered through or by at that time? Would be my question back. I know we're in the chat box there, but if that could be answered in the chat too.
It was the Department of Economic Development at the time.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
And Penny Carver actually has a question. So Penny, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thanks, Debbie. Last year, we had a visit on the South Shore from Greg, whose last name I forget, the placemaking guru. And we had a couple of sessions with him. And one of the things I was struck by was his statement or his advice: ignore the engineers, do and follow what the people are doing. So I'm wondering about the tension that then is created between existing bylaws and regulations and things that just crop up because people are doing something and that has a lot of traction and is attractive. But when it bumps up against existing bylaws. And I'm just wondering about any comments you might have about that interesting dialectic.
Well, I would say, to ignore engineers, it might sound nice and audacious, but I don't think you can. What we're trying to do through this process is to work with engineers, especially through TIR, to develop a new and help coordinate new thinking that can better benefit Main Streets. I think to ignore engineers would be the wrong approach. And in my view, I think that they're important. You just have to, what we have to do is work with them to have them understand what Main Streets mean, how valuable they are, what interventions from an engineering perspective can help Main Streets with a priority, maybe less so on vehicular speeds and 80th percentiles, but more what works to create safety and mobility and economic viability in these small Main Streets. So I wouldn't say ignore engineers. I would disagree with that. But I think the platform that we're using is to better facilitate that coordination with TIR. One of our principals spoke to creating liaisons with TIR. And I think with Elizabeth and her group at TIR, that is the best way forward.
I'm delighted to hear that collaborative approach. I was very concerned about the other. I'm in Mahone Bay, and currently we are sort of working on a traffic study and trying to implement some traffic changes, and we also are incorporating the Blue Route suggestions to the best of our ability. So it feels a little bit piecemeal, because we have several different things going on at the same time, as well as a beautification grant. But we're sort of going at it bit by bit. So just so you know, that's going on in Mahone Bay.
And if I could just jump in, I just want to acknowledge Elizabeth again with TIR, who is a collaborator. She's part of our AT committee and certainly an early reviewer of this whole document as it grew. So I'm not going to speak for Elizabeth, certainly, but just so everyone knows, this was a collaborative approach to get to the point in the final product that you see here. And then Penny, just back to your point about the engineers, what I heard you say when you relayed that story is I thought about desire lines and that idea that, you can go to a public park and engineers have built all the sidewalks all over the place, but there's this one path worn through the grass where everyone has been walking despite where the sidewalks are. That's what I thought of. So, listen to the public and observe and watch and wait a little bit, and then use those smart engineers to be responsive to build the best and safest infrastructure that you can. That's how I interpreted what your guru told you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I think we just have a couple of questions/comments. I'll go through them fairly quickly because I just noticed it's 12 o'clock and I promised to get people out of here on time. But Omar from the town of Wolfville has thrown his hat in the ring, and they would be interested, I think, in being part of the initiative. And I know they've done some interesting stuff this summer, which with some success, but they're interested in exploring and moving forward with some of the initiatives that they put in place. And Omar, if you want to jump in, please do. Deb Ryan with Annapolis County was talking a little bit about Bridgetown's Main Street program. It's been working really well for the past 2 years. And she also mentioned that there are some great things happening as well. I read it earlier. I think she said in the communities of paradise. So lots of great things happening in some very small rural communities. Lenny White from Westville, they were part of the initial project and looking forward to maybe generating some new ideas and engagement on what they've done so far with the Main Streets initiative. And Lois, Hubbard's is located within 2 municipalities, the HRM and Chester area. And would it be more efficient to change it to be located in just one of the other municipalities before implementing or attempting to implement a Main Street? So I guess that might be a question for Dave and or Kieran, maybe Gord too.
I'll jump in. So Lois, I'm the active living coordinator for the municipality of Chester. I am speaking to you right now with the municipal line going through my backyard. My house is on the HRM side. My woodshed is on the Chester side. And it's my task to work with my neighbors to negotiate this and navigate through this process the best as possible. So yes, early on, I've tried to corral everyone on both sides of the line at a staff level and councillor level to just get in the same room and have a chat about this stuff. That being said, the political boundary is probably not going to change anytime soon, but the approach that the community has adopted here is kind of the notion of one Hubbards, recognizing that all of us who live here live as if that line on the map does not exist in our daily lives. So let's think about the flow and the traffic and how we move about in our community and how we shop and where we go and all those things and how we get to school. So that notion of one Hubbards is cropped up. And that's kind of the functional way to overcome the geopolitical boundary right now.
Thank you, Gord. And I think this might be our last comment from Natalie. Oh, no, might have one more. Natalie with the town of Yarmouth, and they're on their 3rd streetscape project. And they've had some placemaking initiatives as well. I know they've had some great success with those initiatives, and they're looking forward to kind of moving forward with the work that's already been done. And Andy from Middleton is engaged in a micro grant business facade upgrade program coupled with other beautification upgrades, planters and kiosks. That sounds very exciting, Andy. That is great. And I think that's it in our chat box. Just gonna look at the time. That's 12:04. I don't know if anyone has one last comment or a quick question.
I would just say that like folks like Omar and Wolfville and others who want to get in touch moving forward, maybe send us a quick note via email and we will coordinate something.
Thank you, David. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm sure we could keep talking, but we did promise we'd end at 12 and it's a few minutes after. So I just want to say thank you very, very much to our presenters, to Kieran, to David, Gord, and Leanne for a great job. Thank you, Judy, from my staff for helping out. And a thank you to all of you for participating today on this beautiful day. I know everybody's probably itching to get outside, so it's lunchtime, so let's get outside. So thank you, everyone. We'll post the webinar recording, and the presentations we mentioned should be up next week. And if anybody has any questions for any of our presenters, or if you don't have access to their email once we close down, you're welcome to send a message generally to our general email at NSFM or to me, and we'll pass it along. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.
Thanks.
Stay safe.
Thanks.